Hey YouTube, it's ICU, and today I'm going to be comparing the all-new HTC One smartphone against Apple's iPhone 5. And as most of my regular viewers are already aware, the iPhone 5 is the phone that I use on a regular basis, so I'm just going to compare it against the latest and greatest Android smartphone as of now, which is the HTC One, and it's powered by a quad-core 1.7 GHz Qualcomm Snapdragon processor. So this thing is an absolute beast. It even performs better than the Nexus 10 tablet, and as some of you may already know, that was previously the top performing Android device. Now, at least according to Geekbench, the HTC One is the top performing Android device. So we're going to pit it against the iPhone 5. And before we begin, I just wanted to say that the iPhone 5 that I will be using in this video is jailbroken, so just know that. Also, it may have an impact on performance. I just want to let you guys know that ahead of time. And first, to start off, let's go ahead and look at the design of these two smartphones. Let's start with the HTC One. Now, this phone features what HTC is calling their zero gap design. It's constructed pretty much entirely out of aluminum and glass, and let me just tell you, this is the most amazing Android phone I've ever seen as far as performance, as far as design. Just everything about this phone is absolutely amazing, and I've got to say, it's definitely my favorite Android device. On the back here, we have what HTC calls their ultra pixel camera with a rear LED flash. It's simply branded with HTC, an AT&T logo, and Beats Audio. And flipping it over, we have a 4.7-inch Full HD 1080p display with 468 pixels per inch. So let me just say, guys, the display on the HTC One is absolutely amazing, and it displays colors in just a way that other smartphones don't. Also, on the front, we have two speakers, and these speakers are what HTC and Beats Audio have coined boom sound. So the whole idea behind boom sound is that you have two front stereo speakers with built-in amplifiers, and that way it directs the sound toward the user instead of having the speaker situated somewhere else on the device, like on the iPhone 5 for instance. The speaker is actually on the bottom. So with the HTC One, again, you have the front-facing speakers, which actually does help. From my personal experience, it does improve the listening, but it's not really that noticeable. I mean, if you plan on using headphones with your device anyway, chances are good that you won't really go out and buy an HTC One just for that feature. Let's go ahead and unlock both devices here. Of course, before I really go into things, I'm going to finish going over the hardware on the HTC One. We also have a front-facing camera there. We have ambient light and proximity sensors. And what's actually really cool is that these two buttons at the bottom, which are actually capacitive buttons, will automatically light up if the ambient light sensor detects low light situations. So let me see if I can trick it here into thinking that we're in a low light situation, and as you can see, I just did. It might not be that noticeable, but the light did come on, and I'm going to remove my finger and the light will fade away. That's just a really convenient feature if you have something like these touch buttons on the screen of the device. However, I do say on the screen very loosely because it's not like the Nexus 4's buttons in the sense that they're actually part of the display. It's actually part of the bezel of the HTC One, so it's actually more like the Galaxy S3 and other Android phones in that sense. And going over the sides, on the left, we do have the micro SIM slot, and switching it on over to the right, we have the volume rocker. And on the bottom, we just have the micro USB port, which is what you'd expect of any Android device these days. And last but not least, on the top, we have the power and lock button. And now let's go ahead and go over the iPhone 5's design, which I'm sure most of you are already familiar with at this point, but let's just go over it right now anyway for the sake of this video. Looking at it, it is constructed entirely out of aluminum and glass, and that is a really nice feel in my opinion. It is definitely on par with the HTC One, or rather the HTC One is on par with the iPhone 5 because of course the iPhone 5 did come out first. At this point, it's almost a one-year-old phone. It will be 1 year old in fall, whereas the HTC One, again, is a brand new phone. It just came out last Friday, so this is the latest in Android tech. Anyway, back to the iPhone 5's design. We have a rear-facing 8-megapixel camera with LED flash, and let's go ahead and flip it on over to the right-hand side. Flipping it over to the left here, we have the volume rocker and the silent toggle switch. And on the bottom, we have the lightning connector, as well as grills for both the speaker and microphone. We also have a 3.5mm headphone jack, which is situated on the bottom of the iPhone 5, which I actually forgot to mention on the HTC One is on the top next to the lock button. Speaking of on the top, let's go ahead and switch the iPhone 5 over here. We have the lock button as well as the power button on the iPhone 5, and on the right-hand side, we just have the SIM tray. Alright, so to really start off this comparison, I thought we'd go over the screen first. Now, as you may have already noticed, the screen on the HTC One is significantly bigger than that of the iPhone 5, and that is, again, because the HTC One has a 4.7-inch display, whereas the iPhone 5 simply has a 4-inch display. One of the key selling points of the iPhone 5, or even the iPhone 4S or the iPhone 4, is the Retina display technology that Apple coined. Now, a Retina display is simply a screen with the maximum number of pixels that a human eye can register at an average distance of use. And the iPhone 5 has a pixel density of 326 pixels per inch. For those of you who are listening, at the beginning of this video, I said the HTC One's display had a pixel density of 468 pixels per inch, and that it was a full 1080p HD display. So yes, that's right. In theory, the HTC One's display is superior in comparison to the iPhone 5. However, there are other things you have to take into consideration, such as the black levels the screen is capable of displaying, as well as the natural saturation of the display. So right now, I'm going to take the time to go ahead and set the brightness to full on both of these devices. So I'm going to turn it up on the iPhone 5 here, and I'm going to switch over to the HTC One. I'm just going to use my brightness widget, and we're going to turn it all the way up here as well. What I notice firsthand right off the bat is that these pictures are comparable. They both look amazing on the iPhone 5 and the HTC One. However, the key thing that really sticks out to me is the fact that the colors on the iPhone 5 look more realistic than on the HTC One. Now, that's not to say that this display doesn't look amazing, because it absolutely does. It just seems like for some reason the saturation and the black levels are slightly off. Again, as you can see, they do look amazing on both of these phones, but again, in my opinion, at least from what I'm seeing, the colors look more accurate on the iPhone 5 than on the HTC One. Let's go ahead and view our last picture for this demonstration, which is actually the reverse picture on the iPhone 5 here. All right, and so I'm going to zoom in again. And this is actually a really good representation of the display quality, because you have a lot of different colors in this specific image, because you have your blues, your greens, and your yellows, which can also be considered orange and red in these rocks here. So essentially, you have your primary colors. And both of these images in real life look significantly different from one phone to the next. They both look good, they just look different. And like I said, unfortunately, it is really hard to accurately display this when I'm actually filming it, because again, you guys are looking at it through the video, through your own device's display, so of course they will be distorted. Now I'm actually going to go to the camera here, and we're going to compare some photos that I took. Alright, so immediately what I noticed firsthand is that the photo on the iPhone 5 has more color and it displays more colors, and it's able to capture a better image than the one over here on the HTC One. And for some reason, it appears that on camera it looks like it's washed out, so I'm going to turn the brightness down just slightly so you guys can get a better idea. Now, unfortunately, even though this is an ultra pixel camera on the HTC One, in reality, its pixel count is actually lower than that of the iPhone 5. However, HTC claims that it can take pictures that are comparable to smartphones with 8 megapixel cameras or higher. So while I definitely agree with that, and while I think the pictures do still look great on the HTC One, you just get a more accurate color representation on the iPhone 5 and on the pictures that the iPhone 5 is able to take. Now you can really tell in this image here, it looks more washed out on the HTC One. Keep in mind, I haven't done anything to these two photos. I simply took them with the camera. There's no editing done. I didn't have HDR mode enabled on either of these phones, so these are in theory the same exact picture. You will notice, however, that you do get more image with the HTC One. That's because of the position of the camera as well as the lens. The lens is different different on the HTC One, so you will get a wider viewing angle. So let me go ahead and just go to my last comparison here. Again, basically the same exact thing I've been saying through these past two photos. You have more realistic colors over here on the iPhone 5 than you do on the HTC One, but you do have a wider viewing angle on the One. So if that's something that you're interested in, this camera might be the one for you. Of course, you've got to keep in mind though, when you buy a smartphone, you're not buying a smartphone just for the camera. You're buying it for all of the other features. It just happens to have a camera on it. All right, and finally, as far as the camera is concerned, I'm going to go over the last point, which is Zoe. So the One has a feature called Zoe, and when Zoe is enabled, essentially it takes a 3-second clip after you take your picture, so that way you can go back in your image and get exactly what you were looking for if maybe it was out of focus, or if you're taking a picture of someone and maybe they blinked. Again, it will take a 3-second video in addition, so you can kind of scrub through your pictures there. But what I've noticed is that pictures taken on the HTC One in the standard traditional camera mode actually look better than the pictures taken when the Zoe camera mode is enabled, which you can do simply by tapping this button in the camera app. Alright, and that basically concludes the camera and photo portion of this video. Now I'm going to turn the brightness back down on the iPhone 5 because again, it does look washed out on camera here. And I'm also going to do the same thing on the HTC One. Now let's go ahead and compare these two devices on a hardware and performance level. Let's start with performance. I'm just going to open up Google Chrome on both of these smartphones, and then from there we're just going to do a few different tests. Nothing scientific, I'm just going to see which one loads something faster. So I'm going to type in a search that I want to search for in Chrome over here on the HTC One. Alright, now that I have what I want to search typed in on the One, I'm just going to tap it on the iPhone 5 at the same exact time, and we will see which one loads first. Again, we are using the same exact browser on both of these devices, Google Chrome. Alright, so as you can see, the HTC One pulled in ahead of the iPhone 5, just barely though, so now we're actually going to load a website. Let's just go ahead and go to the first result. And it loaded faster on the iPhone 5 than it did on the HTC One. So let's go ahead and scroll down and load the desktop version of this site on both of these devices to see which one loads faster. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and tap switch to regular theme at the exact same time. And the iPhone 5 did finish first in this instance. Now the HTC One is still loading everything else on the site, such as the sidebar and the widgets, and now it's just finished. So this time we did have the iPhone 5 pull ahead. Again, we're using the same exact browser, and now what we're going to do is do a browser performance test. I'm going to use the native browser on both of these devices. In the case of the iPhone 5, it's Safari. In the case of the One, I really don't know what it is. It's just HTC's browser, and they call it exactly that, browser. So I'm going to run a SunSpider JavaScript test. First though, let me go ahead and try and find it. I'm just going to do a Google search for it. SunSpider JavaScript. And as you can see, I just tried to use the speech to text function of the One. It kind of worked. It didn't really get the SunSpider part in, it just got spider. But other than that, it did what I needed it to do. Let me go ahead and do the same thing over here on the iPhone 5. SunSpider JavaScript test. All right, there we go. On the 5, it did get it. So let's go ahead and go to the top link on both of these smartphones. That doesn't really matter. I'm not really testing for which one loads this first. What we're going to do is run the test at the same time though and see what the results are once they finish. So let's go ahead and tap and hold on both of these, and we're going to go ahead and press open. Alright, now it's just running through the SunSpider JavaScript test. I'm going to take a second and I'll be right back once they're finished. Okay, and both finished at about the same time, but let me just scroll in and we will review the results. Now remember, when you are performing a SunSpider JavaScript test, you want a lower time because that means it completed it faster. So over here on the iPhone 5, we have a finishing speed of 938 milliseconds, whereas on the HTC One, we have 1,123.7 milliseconds. So if you're browsing, you might have slightly better performance on the iPhone 5 than than you would on the HTC One. Alright, and to wrap up these tests, I'm just going to run Geekbench on both of these devices. Alright, now that it's loaded up, for those of you that don't know, Geekbench is actually a hardware benchmark tool that should, in theory, tell you how fast your device can perform different tasks. You'll notice a huge difference between these two. Over here on the HTC One, it is powered by, again, a Qualcomm Snapdragon 600 processor at 1.7 gigahertz. Now, this is a quad-core processor. On the iPhone 5, however, we do have Apple's own A6 processor at 1.3 gigahertz, but it's a dual core. We also have what Geekbench reports as 1.53 gigabytes of RAM on the One, whereas we have 1016 megabytes on the iPhone 5, which is essentially the equivalent of 1 gigabyte. All right, and I already know that the HTC One is going to perform better, but let's just go ahead and run these benchmark tests on the two devices. Okay, both are finished, and the One has a final score of 2,555. The iPhone 5 has a final score of 1,665. So a significant difference between these two. And as I mentioned earlier, when I go to compare inside of Geekbench 2, it says that this device is actually more powerful than even a device like the Samsung or Google Nexus 10 tablet, and it performs significantly better than the Galaxy S3, which has a score of 1,719. So it will be interesting to see what happens once Samsung releases their Galaxy S4, if it'll be able to top the HTC One's performance score of 2,555. All right, and that essentially concludes my comparison of these two devices. I just wanted to give my final thoughts though. Now, I have used the HTC One as a primary phone for a few hours, and I just had to go back to iOS. There's nothing wrong with the HTC One. In fact, if I decide to actually switch to Android, this would be the device that I would go with. It's just from an efficiency standpoint, the iPhone 5 is faster, in my opinion. However, I did really like the 4.7-inch 1080p display on the HTC One. Again, it looks incredible, and I really found it to be an enjoyable device to use once I got past the fact that I was actually using Android. Another big gripe that I have with the Android operating system is just how fragmented it is. Now, it doesn't just affect the devices and which version of Android new devices are released with, like the HTC One, which doesn't even have the latest version of Android, but it also even comes down to the quality of applications. So I've noticed that because of the way Apple's done it, and because they focused on a small number of devices, developers only have to develop applications to accommodate a small number of devices. Whereas if you're developing for Android, you have to accommodate a large number of devices with different screen resolutions, different capabilities, so they kind of have to water down certain applications, and they don't perform nearly as well as the applications on devices like the iPhone 5, and unfortunately that's simply because of the lower end Android devices. With that said though, there are some really great apps on Android that look absolutely fantastic, definitely comparable to the same exact applications that you'd be able to get on iOS. So those are just my final thoughts. I'd really love to know what you guys think. Just be sure to let me know in a comment down below. Just be sure to rate this video up to enter the $100 Amazon gift card giveaway I'm holding, and if you liked it. Also be sure to leave a relevant comment down below in the comment section. Once your comment's posted, you'll be automatically entered to win that $100 Amazon gift card. And of course, just be sure to stay tuned. The Samsung Galaxy S4 is coming out soon. I will be getting it, and I will be doing a few videos on it. So if you aren't already subscribed, just be sure to do so. And if you have yet to watch my HTC One unboxing video, just be sure to check that out, because I do highlight most of the aspects of the device, and I also go over what comes in the HTC One's box. So if you're at all interested, just be sure to check out that video. I'll have an annotation on the screen if you're on the desktop version of YouTube right now. And finally, to be updated more often, just be sure to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. And until next time, this is ICU signing out.